All right, I think we are live. It says we're live, so I'm going to start talking to y'all. Thank you for tuning into today's podcast with the ever so amazing Amanda Hamilton. I think she's a woman that needs no introduction, yet I want to bring her to you all and have her tell her story of starting as a racer all the way up to now being a professional mountain biker, the doors that have opened up for her, the bike that she's on, all the nerdy things that we like to talk about. I want to talk about with Amanda. She's an amazing human being out of New Mexico. Without further ado, let's just bring her on. She's backstage. There
Oh,
you are.
what a perfect intro. Thank you.
How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great. And I'm doing much better after talking to you. I mean, I feel like on a Tuesday, everybody probably just finished up with their day jobs and had to live that normal life. So any
Yep.
opportunity to talk about mountain biking, I'm feeling good.
That's such a good point. Like mountain biking
Mhm.
just brings the joy in so many people's lives. Like I just left my 9 to 5. I want to talk bikes now. Let's talk about
Exactly. I
bikes.
know it's almost nice to be like, you know what, like I can identify as many people, like many different types of people as I want, right? And it's like not just the job, but the lifestyle, the hobbies, and the passion. So love it.
Yep, absolutely. We've got Trail Pimp in the house. He's one of our biggest
What's
supporters. He's
up?
always here, always supporting us, always listening.
Trail Pimp's the
I
real
love
though.
him.
You're a huge supporter, dude, for so many people. You're so cool.
He
What's up?
really is. Yeah. Maybe we should have him as the first male guest on our podcast. I don't know.
Ooh.
We'll see.
Hmm.
So, welcome.
Thank
And
you.
you and I have chatted for a little bit, and we have our paths have crossed so many times, I think. But this is the first time we're actually meeting face to face, which is pretty neat.
It is weird.
And we were just talking about how we've talked to each other, we know each other, but we don't
Mhm.
know each other.
Well, yeah, and I mean, especially when you think about like just women in the industry in general, right? I feel like we kind of all know each other, and I
Yeah.
feel like we all just have this like automatic friendship, even if we're across the country, never seen each other in person. So it's easy to kind of see you and be like, yes, I know you, I'm comfortable with you, and I feel like we're friends already.
I love that about so many women in the industry. All the ones that I've met, they've been so welcoming and kind. And it's
Yeah.
like, it's just like you said, we just know each other. It's like
Yeah.
this like when I went to Rome Fest. Have you been to a Rome Fest before?
No, where is that?
So they have, well, now this year, Ash and Andy, it's a women, like the first ever women festival ever. They started it a few years back. This
Wow.
year it's going to be in Fruta. It's just a huge party, basically. It's a huge,
Um,
gigantic
okay,
party.
I live so close to Fruta, so that would be so easy for me to go to.
We're going. It's in September. I'll give you the details offline.
Perfect. Perfect. I will
It's
make a point to
amazing.
be there.
Absolutely amazing. And when the first time I went, I was the Sedona one a couple years ago, and I felt like I had the biggest cheer squad of my life behind me. Because every
Yes.
time I'd ride something, they'd be like, "Yeah, Mia, you got this." So I would
Yes.
never be depressed if I had mountain bike ladies around all the time.
For real. For real. Yeah. So I mean, like, how is your local scene? Like, do you ride with a lot of women on a day to day, or what does that look like?
I have a few female riders that I ride
Mhm.
with. My wife is mainly my riding partner, just like
Right.
you with your
Yep.
husband. It's the same
Built-in
thing.
riding partner. Oh yeah.
Yep, it's like for life, signed a
Yep.
contract.
Oh yeah.
But I do have a couple friends I ride with. There is a really big women's chapter here called Girls Gone Riding. It's the
Oh
biggest women's
sweet.
group in the country. Um,
Wow.
but often it's tough to get a lot of women together.
For sure. For sure.
I ride with Mark and those guys too
Yeah.
a lot, even though they're like a couple hours away from me. They're up south.
I think it's worth the drive though.
Yeah, when I hit you up when you were here, I was like, "Dang, are you still riding in Greer?" And you're like, "Oh, we're actually leaving." I was like,
I know.
"Dang."
But don't worry though, because we were like actually not ready to leave California when we did this winter. We're already planning
Mm,
a trip back this coming winter. Like it was so much fun. We
yes,
loved it. So
yes.
I
Well, let
know.
me know. We'd love
Yeah.
to ride with you guys. There's a spare room here if you need a place to crash.
Heck yeah.
So
Oh, I
as
love
long as
it.
you like dogs, I think you're
You
good.
know what, dude? A free place to stay. We'll dog sit for sure.
So let's dive in
Yeah.
to Amanda Hamilton, the rider. Tell
Yeah.
us real quick, how old were you when you started riding bikes?
Riding bikes. So
Riding bikes, not racing yet, riding
yeah,
bikes.
I started actually, I can't really remember my first bike riding experience, but what I can really remember is my first dirt bike experience.
Mm,
And the first time I got on a dirt bike, I was probably um, 12 or 13. And it was a little bit of a traumatic experience because my first 2 times on a bike were bikes that were massive. Like, keep in mind, I'm a pretty
Mm,
big lady. Like, I'm 6 foot tall, but as a 10-year-old, I probably wasn't 6 feet tall, and I'm pretty sure my
yeah.
dad put me on, like, a 500cc Honda from, like,
Oh,
1991. And,
God.
like, yeah, like, here's the clutch, and here's this, and of course, pop the clutch, flip the freaking bike, and didn't go anywhere, right? So I was like, "All right,
Yeah.
that didn't work out." The
Yeah.
next time I got on a bike, I was on, like, a 125, so it was a little bit more appropriate, and I got that one going without flipping it, but then, of course, I came to my first turn, and I turned the handlebars as opposed to leaning and totally laid the bike down on top of me,
Oh,
right? So,
no.
off to a fantastic start when it came to life on 2 wheels.
You poor
Yeah, so
thing.
it was, like, really funny, but for some reason, I, like, very specifically have that memory of me laying that bike down on me and my brother running towards me because first off, he was pissed because I probably broke his bike. I don't think he really cared too much about me, but so he's like throwing the dirt bike off me, being like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Dude, like no one taught me how to ride this. Like I just
Yeah.
got on and hoped for the best." Um, so like I would say that was kind of like my first experience on bikes, and
Oh my
I
God.
got so into like dirt biking and four wheeling. And keep in mind, when I was a kid, like spent my years in the Midwest, and so it's flat, and so like the big stuff there is
Oh,
like motocross,
yeah.
enduro dirt biking, and stuff like that. And so that was kind of where the excitement was. Fast forward to college, and like being an older teenager, I was into your basic sports, right? Like tennis and things like that.
Soccer,
Went,
that kinds of stuff.
yeah, went into college and of course couldn't bring the dirt bikes because I mean, you can't really put a dirt bike in a dorm room. And I like put it all away. And as I got older in college, I busted out a road bike and I hated it. It was so boring. Like my butt chafed like crazy. And I was just like, I don't get it. Like, I don't get why people love this. Right. But I just kept doing it. And I was about 21 and I was lamenting to a coworker about how lame road biking was, but I was like, "Oh, it keeps me in shape, whatever." And he's like, "Dude, you should really try mountain biking."
Yeah.
And he said that, and looking back, I don't know why I never thought about mountain biking as an option because I grew up around extreme sports like
Mm.
motocross, skateboarding, surfing, all of the
Yeah.
above, and I never thought about mountain biking. And this was, keep in mind, I was living in Minnesota at the time.
Okay.
And so he's like, "Yeah, there's this city park, like you should go check it out." So I went and bought this like, $90 26er hardtail and just like took it out to the park. And I was like, "This is the sickest thing ever." And I was so bad at it. But like literally after my second time riding, I sold all of my road biking gear. I'm like, screw road biking. That was horrible. Like I'm a mountain biker
Still
now. I'm like,
is, no offense.
it is. And I was like, "Oh my God, like I'm a mountain biker now." And so at about 22 was when I got on my first mountain bike, I would say realistically.
Uh-huh.
And I'd be curious to hear a lot of people's progression story because I think mine was quite slow, to be frank. So
Hmm.
I'm 30. I just turned 30 in February.
You're
And
young.
that's a different conversation, but it really took me like 8 years to get to a point where I feel like, I'm pretty good at this. And my progression for really the first probably 5 years was slow and a little bit
Hmm.
isolated. Like I kind of rode by myself. I eventually introduced my boyfriend, now husband, into mountain biking, and we kind of learned together. And, we made a couple friends who mountain bike, but nobody was super serious about it. And so we just kind of like
Mhm.
trail rode and dawdled around. And it really wasn't until we moved to Kansas City and got into that riding scene and then understood that Bentonville was really close to us.
Yeah.
We kind of like started riding Bentonville like a couple years before it became like the mountain bike capital of the world. And so we kind of went.
Self-proclaimed.
Exactly, but I mean, to be real, the vibes there are immaculate.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
the culture and the vibes are insane.
Yeah.
And I think there was when you start looking at trails and it really opened your eyes to be like, "Oh, like, this is what I can do?" Like, you're telling me there's, like, 30-foot jumps and drops, and, like, people are
Yeah.
doing tricks, and I was like, "Oh, like, those are things I can do on bike." And so I really think that first experience of like going and seeing a jump trail, which sounds
Yeah.
so simple, was like eye-opening to be like, "Oh, dude, like I don't have to just like toddle around on a little trail and just, do a 3-mile loop and call it good. Like there's so much more."
Yeah.
And so those, like I said, like those first like 6 years were a little isolating, but I was having so much fun. And I think what really like grew the love of the sport and the exponential progress of the sport was surrounding myself with like an environment that promoted and produced progression, and
Yes.
getting around some people that promoted and produced progression, which
Yeah.
I'd love to say you can do it on your own, but sometimes it's so much easier to accept help.
And it's funny you say that because for me, it's been about the same time. I started mountain biking. I'm 42, so I started mountain biking when I was 33. But I started with just my wife and I on a hardtail, not knowing a lot of people. So kind of similar. Like
Yeah.
I only really progressed in the last 3 years, 3.5 years after I discovered other people to ride with. I
Yes.
found the community. I
Yes.
was watching people ride.
Mhm.
And just this weekend or last weekend, we were in Sedona and I had some photos snapped of me riding. And I was like, holy cow, I look pretty good.
Yes. Oh my
And
God, I love that.
7 years ago, no, you wouldn't have caught me looking that good on a bike. But you're right. It's not that I don't think it was a slow progression. I think it was the progression of finding your people.
Yeah,
And then that something just kind of clicked, right? I think you always had that. You're naturally an athletic person. So I think
exactly.
it was when you found your people that you're like, oh yeah, I'm pretty good at this.
Yeah, and that was kind of the thing, right? Because like in Kansas City, there's a lot of like technical trail riding. So I got really good at that. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Like this is what it's about. And like, you watch downhill racing and I'm like, well, I don't live in Europe, so I'm not going to do that. But then like to see some place so geographically close to me have something so different and so challenging, I
Yeah.
was like, oh my gosh, like that is what it can be for me. And
Yeah.
that's when I was like laser focused on being like, all right, like let's get better, let's be the best we can be type of thing.
That's amazing. And making that mind shift is so critical to going from let's be the best that I could be. Is that what kind of led you to want to participate in the Pink Bike Academy?
Yeah, you know what? That for me was a little bit of a chance to highlight different areas of the world. I do think a lot of mountain bike media spends a lot of time in Finale and Whistler and
Yeah.
Squamish. And I think a lot of times we feel a little like lame because it's like, oh,
Hmm.
like, well, I don't ride in Squamish, so I'm not validated as a rider. Like
Yeah.
I sometimes feel that, right? And so I was like, you know what? Like there's a lot of great communities and great areas in every single state in every single country. Like I want to go
100%.
show that like I can hang and be like, hey, like I'm from Missouri. Everybody probably makes fun of the Midwest or doesn't even realize it's a thing. Like I want to go there and kind of show what we have in our space. And so through the interview process and the casting process, I was like, guys, like I want to like show the story and talk about our community and like the really like grassroots vibe that we had there. And like
Hmm.
show that I can kind of hang out and say I learned skills in the Midwest that could
Yeah.
apply to a place like British
Yeah.
Columbia.
Yeah.
Um, and it was interesting because the skills did apply. I certainly wasn't able to ride as fast
Hmm.
as the people who rode in Kelowna, regularly, but I was
Hmm.
still able to do the features and hang with everybody, which was a
Yeah.
really, really cool experience for me. But that was another pretty cathartic experience where I sat back and looked at some of the features on that mountain and was like, oh my God, there's a step further I can take this. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you
Yeah.
feel like a superhero because you're like, yeah, like I hit like a 40-foot tabletop. And then you ride behind somebody who does a backflip on a jump. And you're like, oh, like I can do that. And so for me, I was like, all right, we're back to square one. We're a beginner again. Like there's this whole other level that you could get to.
But that's so true with everything in mountain biking.
It
Like
is.
I'm deathly afraid of my wheels leaving the ground. I'm capable of my wheels leaving the ground, but I'm
Yeah.
deathly afraid of it because I've slipped on my pedals in the past
Sure.
when I didn't have technique or I didn't know what I was doing. So it's always in my head. But
Yeah.
you're right. Like I leveled up in Sedona and then I wanted to do something else. And I'm like, oh, I need to like go back to the fundamentals if I want to do highline or if I want
Oh,
to do this line,
yeah.
because you're right. That's how it's like.
Oh my gosh, I know. Yeah. And so for me, like when I left there, I was like, holy cow. And it was funny because the day that I left, before we like filmed the like elimination,
Mhm.
it was me and another gentleman who left at the same time, and we were talking to Cam McCall kind of like in the house before we like did the film. And he was like, like you represented your space really well. And he's like, but you have to realize like you're a really big fish in a really small pond. And it was a harsh truth, but and he kind of said that, and initially I was like dang bro, like chill. But then honestly I did take it a bit as a compliment, and I was like, you know what,
Yeah.
like there are some times where like you're limiting your own progression in some of the environments you put yourself in. And I don't want to say at all that, being in Missouri limited my progression at all, because the sky was the limit for me. And we ended up moving to New Mexico for work, which
Yeah.
was a great place to be transferred to.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting thing that he said. He's like, yeah, man, you're a big fish in a small pond. And I was like, I see what you're saying, because like I said, there was a dude on a blue jump trail in front of me doing backflips on the same jumps I was hitting. So I was like, there's more to this.
100%. Yeah, that's a really good perspective. I wouldn't have taken that as I would have taken it as a compliment for sure the second you said that, because I think
Yeah,
maybe he was just saying all of the potential that you have and how being in different places will open up your point of view and everything you can progress in those areas.
absolutely.
You
Yeah.
are right, though. That is a good point. Of some people have this elitist frame of mind of you have to ride in Squamish or you have to ride in Whistler and you have to ride here. And there is this friend of mine, Tony Da Silva. He does the Outsider
Yeah.
MTV channel,
Yeah.
and he did a video a while back about loving your local trails. And like everyone always thinking about, oh, but I want to ride here, and this place is this, and this place is that. When
Yeah.
he was bringing it back to exactly what you said, which was you got to look at your local trails and your community and the
Yes.
potential of what you have there. That stuck with me because sometimes I have nothing but cross country trails over here, and that's why I'm on an e-bike most of the time, because I'm
Yeah.
not a typically pedally person.
Yeah.
But he's right. Like, look at all the potential you have where you live, and make fun out
Exactly.
of it.
Exactly. And maybe don't be like, oh, every single ride I have to get better. Like maybe sometimes you just want to enjoy the flowers and enjoy the nice weather. And there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that, right? Like I think mountain biking can be so many things. And I spend a lot of time making it a challenge and a
Right.
sport that highlights skill. But there's nothing wrong with just going out and having a really nice pedal to decompress. And
A
I
hundred
need
percent.
to remember that a lot more.
Yeah, 100%. Do you find that now that, I mean, I think to me, you've always been a professional athlete, but now it's like that status, right? Professional athlete.
I
Do you
know.
find that every time you go and ride, you're doing it with a purpose to get better? And then you have to get out of that headspace and be like, no, I just want to have fun today.
Yeah, I tend to do that. Like that's where my head immediately goes. However, in the past, probably 5 years. So before I got really into mountain biking, I was a really serious rock climber and
Mm,
was really serious about sport climbing and bouldering. Yeah, and
me too.
so me naturally, I have a lot more strength than power endurance. So I was a better boulderer than sport
Hmm.
climber. And I would find that on, my menstrual cycles, there would be weeks where I just was not strong and my body cannot produce the strength that I was expecting it to produce. And it resulted in me having weeks or 10 days of being so frustrated and disappointed with how I
Oh,
was climbing. And I was like, I'm so bad at this. I'm not progressing at all. And I really did take a step back and kind of just like understand like my body and my biology and say, hey, there's going to be weeks where my iron levels are low, my hormones
yep.
are in weird spaces, and I need to respect that and lean into other strengths during those times. So, like, focus on technique or just maybe do like a more endurance centric climb, right? And so, luckily, I was able to have those types of experiences in a different sport and bring it
Hmm.
to mountain biking.
Hmm.
And to be frank, Saturday this week was a really perfect example of me riding terribly. I had a really heavy leg day in the gym the day before, and my legs were super sore. And I didn't feel strong. I felt pretty fatigued. I was climbing really, really slowly and felt like a little off balance on the downhills. And I
Hmm.
was really frustrated with myself. But kind of halfway through the ride, I was like, hang on, like, let's take a pause, have an out of body experience, and say, your body's not feeling great today. Your mind's not in the right space. Like, let's dial it back a little bit and set your expectations to be a little bit different. Because I don't think it's productive coming out of a ride disappointed when
Yep.
physically you were never going to have a top notch ride to start with. So
Yes.
I try to be patient with myself on that because, again, looking at the media, looking at everyone's Instagram, all you see is the best of how they're performing. And you don't see the crappy days. You don't see the days where they're feeling like garbage, where they don't want to get on the bike. So I have to be patient with myself on those types of days.
100%. 100%. And I think that's key for a lot of people that even see Instagram and aren't maybe at a professional level and just ride recreationally. And they think, oh, I want to be able to do this. I want to be able to do that. And also be
Yeah.
kind to yourself because yeah, you can get there and do it, but don't compare so much. I feel like so many people compare. I'm guilty of that too.
Oh,
I'm
all the
guilty of being like, shit, I should have done that. And
Yeah,
then
for sure. Be like, oh, they did it. Like, why can't I do it? Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Have you ridden in Sedona before?
I have. Yeah, I've ridden there 2 times. I was at Sedona Fest last year, which we know how wonderful that was. Not
Oh,
not
yeah.
not a lot of riding happened last year. And yeah, I frankly am not a huge fan of Sedona or Moab. I'm not a
Is it
big
the chunk?
it's the trail riding. Like, I want a really
Mm.
big, dramatic downhill. And, I find myself in places like Moab and Sedona. I'm like, okay, I've been pedaling for a really long time. Like, where's the payoff? Like, where's the downhill? And then you just go back to the trailhead, and I'm like, what? I was like, wait, like, where was the cool part? Which is so dramatic, right? But like, I prefer downhill. I prefer the big jumps and things like that. And so
Yeah.
I appreciate it because it challenges me in different ways, and it's so beautiful there, but it's not
Yeah,
a place that
yeah.
I, like, rush to, like, on a weekend, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
No, I totally get it, and there are friends of mine that are like that. There's some girlfriends of mine here that are just like you. They prefer a downhill or something a little bit
Yeah,
flowier and stuff. And my friend Meg was asking me one time, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think you're gonna really like Sedona because it's pedally and chunky, and you got to hike a
yeah,
bike sometimes. There isn't a ton of flow. There's some flow,
yeah. No,
but
it's funny though, because like, sometimes we'll be like, "Oh, we're going to Arizona for the weekend." Like, we went to Arizona a few times this weekend, this winter, because the winter here is pretty hard, and everyone's like, "Oh, are you going to Sedona?" And we're like, "We're going to Mesa to go ride Haas." And a lot of people are like, "What?" Like,
yeah,
Sedona is such a world-class destination, and we're like, "Yeah, we're
yeah.
gonna go to Phoenix," you know?
I mean, Haas has some amazing trails. Although
Haas
I've never ridden there, I cannot wait to ride the Haas trail
it
system.
is crazy. Like, again, like, the energy there is so high, and, like, and the craziest part is, like, that whole place is volunteer built, and, like, the Forest
Yeah,
Service is just so on board with everything they're doing there, and it has a really great culture of a lot of hikers, like, respecting that space and
that's
not being,
awesome.
like, grumpy about mountain bikers and stuff like that, so it's a really cool spot.
Yeah, that's awesome. The Sedona Mountain Bike Fest was really fun. We had 50 people show up to the co-ed ride and 30 some ladies show up to the ladies ride the next
Oh
day. Yeah, dude, it
my
was insane.
gosh, that's
And so
amazing.
at one point, we had to tell the hikers, like before, not even the hikers, before, in the middle, and at the end of the ride, Jess and I were stopping, being like, okay, be kind to the hikers. Like, make sure you tell them you're coming. And
Yes.
at one point, I was like, Joey, Mark's co host,
Yep.
they were behind me and I was leading the ride. And I was like, okay, there's some hikers. Like, I'm yelling out, there's
Yeah.
hikers. And I tell the hikers, I'm so sorry. There's a big group of us. And then Joey goes, yeah, I think there's 50 people. And I was like, 50,
You
15?
just
He's
you
like,
just kept,
no,
like, acquiring
50.
people. You were, like, acquiring people as you were riding.
I had no clue it was that popular. It was insane. Next
That's
year, though,
amazing.
if you can make it, I'll make it a fun ride for you. I bet. I promise. We'll make it
I
a fun ride.
I will say I had a little tinge of FOMO watching a couple stuff coming out from everybody because the weather was so good and
It was
everybody got to
perfect.
spend time on the trails. And I was like, I think I'm like the worst festival goer because I'm not the first one to be like, I'm gonna go network and like do all this stuff. I'm just like, we should go ride bikes. And I feel like a lot of people did a lot of bike riding over the weekend. And I was like, okay, good,
Yeah.
everybody did it right.
Yeah. And we were there the week before, so we've been riding like the
Nice.
week prior. So you're in New Mexico now,
Yeah.
and Angel Fire Bike Park is in New Mexico.
Oh
So
yeah,
that's probably in your backyard. That's probably one of
it
your favorite
is.
places to ride.
Absolutely.
So Trail Pimp is asking, what is your favorite run at Angel Fire Bike
Oh my
Park?
gosh. It's not even a question. It is so Da Vinci Code is one of
Da
the
Vinci.
black trails that kind of starts off the very, very top of the mountain. And it
Mhm.
kind of takes a long way around the backside. And it's like a scenic, kind of like more down country black type of trail. So that's cool. But the best part is it feeds you into like the black free ride line called Hungry
Mm.
Hippo. And
Ooh.
Hungry Hippo has like it's a bunch of like, 30 to 45-foot jumps on it. And it's just like huge berms, and you're averaging like 30 miles an hour the whole time you're going down it. And so that is like by far my favorite. So you link up Decode to Hungry Hippo, and then you shoot out a Hungry Hippo and go into the pro line at
Yeah.
Angel Fire called Candyland. And
Oh my
Candyland is
god.
so simple. It's just three like huge jumps followed by like a boner log off the end of it, just down back to the lift. So it's just like I think that run, if you would probably count out the jumps, there'd be like 30 just like huge jumps that you can hit down the
No
mountain. So it's like,
way.
it's perfect because it's like you don't need brakes. You can just laugh the whole time down. Like it's the best run ever.
So, do they allow drones there? Because I want to bring my drone and
Oh
film you
my
guys
gosh.
going down that
So
thing.
I'm not sure. However, I have a pretty good relationship with like their social media guy. Because we'll just like send stuff back and forth, and sometimes we'll bring like our nice cameras on the mountain.
Yeah.
And we have not asked him about drones yet, but we are going to this season. And I'm super bummed because if you remember last fall, there was like a pretty like major eclipse that came through this
Hmm.
area. And we were at Angel Fire at the time, and it was amazing. And I was like, it would be so sick if we had a drone and we could capture footage during the eclipse. So
Yeah.
I'm going to definitely ask him. We might be able to have a situation where like we could go out in the morning or in the evening and like do some stuff.
Ooh.
But yeah, like the social media guy is like he's so chill and like so relationship driven that I'm sure if I kind of asked him and gave him the right idea, he'd be like, yeah, we should totally do it.
When is the season there? Do you know, like when it opens and closes?
Yes, they just released their season passes. I think the opening day is like May 16th.
Okay.
And they're letting season pass holders like come on that Thursday as like an opening party. And it's like
Ooh.
it's literally May through October. So the season is
Okay.
incredibly long. It's awesome.
Yeah, that is long. Because
It
you
is.
guys still get snow there. It's just not till later in the year, right?
Yeah, we do. And Angel Fire actually, like everywhere, has actually gotten a huge amount of snow this year.
Yeah.
Honestly, even Albuquerque, because so I live in Albuquerque and we have a big
Hmm.
mountain just east of the city, and there's a ski resort on that that just opened up again this year. And our local mountain bike association is actually lobbying hard to get a bike park on our local mountain too.
That'd be amazing.
I know.
I
It's
love
so
people that do that stuff and just I love people that are the go-getters and try and make stuff happen like that for people. That's
I
so amazing.
100% agree. So I'm friends with the president of the association is called AMBA. It's the Albuquerque Mountain Bike Association, and I'm friends with the president. And she's a professional enduro racer, and
Mm,
it's so cool because she's 30, like she's young, and she's the president of this association. And like she talks in front of the Forest Service, she talks in front of the city to like get all this stuff done. And it's super cool because her and her partner, they're both very passionate racers and like really, really focused on progression. And so the stuff that they're building in Albuquerque and lobbying for is progressive trails. Like we have
amazing.
machines on the back of the mountain right now building a brand new blue flow trail just in the
Wow.
national forest, and we're refreshing our double black free ride line on the back of the hill.
That's
And so it's
amazing.
nuts. I know, because I'm like, when I think of mountain bike associations, I'm like, oh, they're going to build a multi-use trail. But these guys are like, no, like we're going to build you some crazy stuff for you to be able to get good. So
What's
it's
her name? You have to connect us.
yeah, her name's Hannah Russert. And it's funny because I know exactly what you mean by you're like, I'm so happy that there's people that do that because she does so much of that not glamorous work, right? Like she does the lobbying, the presentations, writing up grants, like all that stuff that like I frankly don't want to touch. And
Yeah.
she does it. And that's the stuff that really, really moves our areas forward, or just our riding culture forward. And like, yeah, total unsung hero of the industry, I would say.
It's hard work doing that stuff, man. Like you don't see all the behind the works, behind the scenes that takes to do that stuff. So
Yeah.
power to her. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, she's like, I'm so grateful that she's able to be the president of our association. It's awesome.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's sweet.
Um, so is it safe to say that Angel Fire is like your favorite place to ride?
Um, yes, definitely. I can't like so opening day is a national holiday in my books. Like I take off, like I don't go to work. I'm
I
like
love that so much.
it's park season, like pull out the cotton t-shirts and the ripped up jeans. We're going to the bike park. But and no, I mean it is. And the funniest part, so before we moved to New Mexico, we used to holiday out here and like drive 11 hours to come to the bike park. And
Wow.
so when we got jobs out here, we were like, Angel Fire is literally our local hill now. And so yeah, I will say it's my favorite place. Like I absolutely love going to visit other places. Like we're gonna go to Whistler this year and go to Killington this year. Um,
Amazing.
but like Angel Fire is a pretty hard bike park. Like it's pretty steep and generally everything there is quite difficult. So I
Mm,
don't feel like I've like outgrown it at all. You know, like there's
okay.
still a lot of room for me to get better there, which is really sweet.
I love that, having a place where you can constantly progress, like you're saying,
Yes.
back to square one, watch someone do something sick and then be like, "Shit, I need to do that
Oh
now."
my God. I know, like there's this quad that I tried to accidentally pull for last season and took a huge wreck because I landed on the face of the jump I was trying to quad.
Oh,
And,
no.
and like it was nuts because it was such a hard crash. Like I literally hit the ground and my friend said my body bounced like 3 feet in the air. and like
Damn.
he ran up to me because he's like, dude, I thought you were gonna be out cold, but I was sitting there like, whoa, that was a crazy crash. And he's like, I thought you were dead. But like it was nuts though, because I was like, wait a minute. I was like, if I just go like 6 miles an hour faster and pull, like you could probably clear it. So like we're to the point at the bike park, I think, that we're just looking at really heinous gaps and being
Oh
like,
my god.
I think we can do it.
You guys stress me out. Like, that's stressful shit just thinking
Well,
about it.
dude, you know what's funny about that gap though? Nobody's seen it until I accidentally tried for it. And to be frank, in my selfish mind, I want to gatekeep it because I want to be the first person to do it and to like be the first woman, the first person to do it.
Hell yeah.
So
Let's get
um,
that on video and blast that all over the internet.
dude, I know it would be nuts because it'd be like a 50-footer by the time you sent it. So yeah, I'm gonna look at it again this year and see if it's possible.
All right, well, here's another question for you. Would you do the free ride lines in Utah?
Yes, yes,
All
and
of the Rampage
we
formation
go
lines?
we've gone the past 2 years, and,
Damn.
I was so angry that they got rid of formation. I was livid, and, it didn't stop the women, like, they did desert days this year, and I told my husband, I was like, "This year," I'm like, "I'm just gonna show up to desert days." I'm like, "Whether they invite me or not, like, I'm just gonna show up, and they're gonna just, like, maybe let me ride with them." Um, but yeah, no, I mean, that place, talk about insane. Like
Yeah,
the GoPro effect there is massive.
yeah.
Any video you look at, you're like, yeah, I could do that. And then you get out there and you're like, oh my God. But I'll tell you, so there's three sites. There's three Rampage sites out there that are like pretty available to the public. And
Mhm.
there's the original site that's definitely the most popular and the most accessible. And there's definitely big stuff there, right? There's like 40-foot drops, big step downs, like pretty big jumps. And it's such a popular place that everybody takes really, really good care of it. So
Yeah,
there's a pretty high level of trust in the stuff that's out there. You're like, yeah, I can
okay.
hit that and trust that it's going to
Yeah,
work. Now,
yeah.
this year was the first time I went to the 2015 site and the 2023 sites. And those are a little bit harder to get to. They're definitely not like publicly available location wise. Like you have to know where you're going to get to them. And
Mhm.
dude, I'll tell you, I saw um Brendog's Battleship. Did you watch 2023 Rampage? Okay.
Yeah, kinda like yeah.
So like one of the big features, Brendan Fairclough like identified this huge like battleship type rock where he gapped onto it and then dropped off of it. And it was a really controversial feature because the judges didn't score it very high because they're like, yeah, if you remove the exposure, it's a pretty technically easy feature. And I was like, that's, because it's pretty scary looking. But I
Said the
saw it.
person not doing it.
I know, I know. I was like, say that with your chest, sweetie, because it looks nuts. And I went out there and saw it in real life. And dude, Mia, I was like sweating. Like I had a headache
No.
after I saw that site, dude, because I feel like I don't like tourist too much, but I felt like a tourist at this 2023 site because it was so amazing too, because they still actually had the finish gate up at the base
Oh,
of the
shit.
mountain. And so I was like able to stand in the finish gate and look up. And so like I saw it was nuts. Like I saw the landing of the
Yeah.
canyon gap where Bienve did his front flip, like
Yep, that
so
was
iconic,
insane.
insane. And like that was amazing because when I was in California, I went to the YT Mill and they had Bienve's bike there that
Yeah,
he did the front flip on. And you
yeah.
could see on the back of his seat a burn mark from where he bottomed out his suspension and his tire burned the back of the seat. And so seeing that bike was insane. And then 3 months later to see the actual jump that he did it off of, like I was over the
Wait,
moon.
and that's a 200 mil
Yeah, it's
suspension
like
bike,
a
isn't it?
downhill
It's
bike. Oh yeah.
yeah.
I mean, huge. So that was like insane. And then to see Brendog's battleship, I mean, dude, it's 500 feet in the air and just giant. And so I was looking at it and I like had a fresh anger for the judges being like, yeah, it's like not technically difficult. And I'm like, sir, I was like, it is. I'm like, like what? Like you go do it. Like, I'm like so it was
I'd like to see you up there doing that.
I know. So it was super funny because there were like two little things we wrote at the new site, but like everything at the new site felt incredibly untouchable. Like everything was huge.
I mean, it looks huge. I think those of us who have an understanding of how steep things look and the GoPro effect and stuff, like I think we can kind of gauge it. But I
Yes.
had both my parents this year who know nothing about mountain biking
Yeah.
sending me videos of the guys doing that stuff. And I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And it's not what I do. So you don't have
Well,
to worry about that.
and I mean, that's the craziest part too, because I mean, again, like G. Atherton's like, I don't think he's human. Like, I think he's not from this planet. But like, it's so crazy because his wreck on his like 80-foot drop, I'm like, well, like he didn't die doing one of the most heinous
Oh,
drops
come on.
ever. And so I was like, I mean, if he can survive that, like maybe this 30-foot drop isn't that bad.
I love how we justify that in our minds of like
I
how.
know. I mean, just absolute insanity. Because like I just remember his like post from him in the hospital, and he's like, "Yeah, like I'm good. I just like cracked my skull," and like, and I was like, "Okay, I'm happy you're happy."
No big deal.
I know.
I was surprised Kyle Straight came back and did it. He killed it, like broke his back the
Nuts.
year before, like absolutely insane.
Dude, I know. And I mean, that's the thing. You look at some of those features that they're hitting in real life, and I'm like, yeah, like I see how these guys are breaking their backs. But I mean, it also just goes to show that like that level of riding is like they're doing so much with their strength training, with their nutrition, with
Yep.
everything to just like handle the G's and just the absolute like aggressive stuff coming at them. It's wild. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, seeing that 2015 site in real life this year was insane. And then like we went back to the old site and
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, this is fine.
No big deal.
It's so different. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait to go and see that in person one day, just to see it and be there. Like, hopefully, we can be there in the first year women are competing in Rampage.
I
Hopefully, that'll be
know.
this year. We'll see.
I know.
We're
I
trying to
know.
make it to Whistler for Crankworks, the first time women are competing in slopestyle.
Are you going to Crankworks?
We're trying to. We're
Okay.
trying to get three of us out there as a media outlet to document it because I think it's
Amazing.
incredibly important to do that.
Absolutely. Because I mean,
So
this is so sad, but like I couldn't tell you the names of the top 3 female slopestyle riders, and that's not right. Like
well, and that's something that we're definitely trying to change. Like we have put out articles recently on like the hard line. The first time they did it when they were in Tasmania, what, like a
yeah.
month or so ago?
Oh my gosh. Goosebumps.
And then Dark Fest,
Yeah.
and we did an article on the women for Crankworks, the top athletes right now
Sweet.
that are competing. And I believe Becca did this really great article for us. She's like the one that's all about the gravity. She's she's the one that knows all the things. But Harriet Smith, Gracie Hemstreet, and Luana Ferguson, they're
Nice.
like the top 3, I think, that
Oh,
are
yeah.
competing, and it's just going to
Oh
be
yeah.
insane. Like doing 60-foot drops,
Nuts.
70-foot stends. Like, give me a
Yeah.
break. I want to
And
see
then,
you
like,
there next year.
as I was gonna say, and like also doing tricks off of those things too, which is insane. Like, dude, Gracie Hemstreet hitting that last jump at Hardline was like, I watched it probably
Yeah.
50 times. And it was
Yeah.
just like, I had nothing to say. I was like, it's nuts. I mean, but it's so like, why is it nuts? Like boys can do it. Like, okay, like just go, you know what I mean? And like Dark Fest this year was
Yes.
so cool. And you know what's funny? One of my favorite things about Dark Fest this year was Vero Sandler with her stupid haircut. Like,
They just like cut her right down the middle.
because I do think she was the first woman to like embrace the full culture of Darkfest and do just a ridiculous haircut. And I'm like, dude, like this is what it's about. I'm like, you're one of the world's best free riders and you're just going hard on it. And like I loved it because like when she went back home, like she ended up shaving her whole head and like doing this really cool flower pattern on it. And I'm like, dude, go off. I'm like, you're there. You're one of the riders, just like going all out with it. It was amazing.
I'm gonna see you there next year. I'm telling you, I want to see you there next year.
You know what? So we're gonna go to Whistler, but we're gonna try to go actually right before Crankworks.
Okay.
And it's selfish intentions because I would like to go at this sweet spot before like a bunch of people come and like ride the trails and potentially blow the trails up. So I was like, oh, if we go and it's like in good shape, you know, a little bit before Crankworks, it might be kind of quiet. Like I very much so want to ride like A-Line and Dirt Merchant for a solid 7 days straight.
That's amazing. I can't wait to see and hear about your progression on there too. Not that you can't do it, but just as you're saying, like, oh, now I want to hit this and do this trick, and now I want to hit this and do this thing. So I can't wait to hear about it.
And I'm like a little scared. Like I'm a little scared to see A-Line, right? Because it's like, what if it's bigger than I think? Or like, what if it's crazier than I think? And like, you know, I have this dream of just like hitting it and cleaning everything, cleaning the moon booter like first run, you know, and you know, I got all week to do it. So
don't get in your head. Don't get in your head. Go in with low expectations.
For sure.
And then you're at the end of it and you're like, holy shit, I just hit all of that. Like, that's insane.
And like, that's one of the things too. It's like, I'm actually kind of looking forward to finding a trail that like, I didn't even know existed and like having it just be like my new favorite trail. You know what I mean? Cause like, I think everybody like highlights A-Line, Crabapple Hits and Dirt Merchant so much. And I'm like, maybe there's just some random trail there that ends up being amazing, you know?
And those are the best because one, they're not crowded.
Yeah.
Two, it's where you want to do all the fun stuff on, you know?
Exactly.
So man, I can't wait. Maybe next time we'll have you on the podcast in the winter time when we actually ride together. You can tell me your new favorite place is Whistler. You never know.
No. I'm saying it now. My new favorite place is always Angel Fire, but Whistler might be a close second.
That's amazing. So when you're doing these incredible lines and hits and jumps, do you have one bike or do you have a couple that you go to for certain things?
Dude, I have one bike.
No effing way.
Yeah, which, you know, honestly, part of me is thinking, is that the right solution? However, there's a lot of setup. I changed the setup on my bike a lot. So, and it's funny because I had my bike set up for Virgin and I took it out this weekend and I forgot to like change the settings and it rode like such a jalopy. I was like, oh my God, like I need to change all the settings, but like, I actually have like a fresh angle headset coming in. And I might swap out a couple forks just to play with it for downhill season. Cause, and some people will probably judge me for this, but I run a 400-pound coil, for park season. And like, if you do a coil calculator, it wants me to be on like a 325 or something like that. So I run a really, really hard coil on my bike and I run all of my like fork pressure at the upper ends of like any sort of rider weight recommendation it has. And then I really do try to make my low speed compression as like dialed up as possible, just so I don't like sink into jumps.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I was messing around a lot with like air shocks and coil, and I'd be curious to see what you have to say about this. But I've ridden air forever. And this was the first season I went onto coil and I like it, but as I'm hitting some of the bigger jumps, the linear feel is nice, but on smaller jumps, I don't think I like the linear feel. So I don't know if I was thinking about doing like a progressive coil or switching between air and coil, and it gets complicated. What do you think?
I think it's because you're running it so high. So for smaller jumps, it's not giving you that feel that you want. If you dialed it down a little bit more, maybe it would, but then you wouldn't get what you want on the higher jumps. I think the solution is you need two bikes, one tuned one way, one tuned another.
That's fair. I mean, it is fair because actually, so my husband, and it's making me really think about it because my husband just bought a duplicate of his like one bike and he transformed it into a park bike. So he made it single speed, has it all dialed for the type of riding he wants to do, like free riding. Yeah. And I'll tell you, I got on that bike this last week and I was like, oh, this thing is sick. Like because it was cool. Like he doesn't have a derailleur on it, so you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a dropper post, so you don't have to worry about that. And I was like, actually,
Yeah.
this makes a lot of sense. So I might
I
just build
mean,
this like bastardized park bike, to be honest.
what do you have? Are you running 180 in the front?
No,
What's your
I'm running a 160, 160.
damn girl?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm the angled headset. I'm thinking about putting a 170 on there. I'm
Okay.
running a full 27.5 platform. I have mulleted before and I haven't really loved it. I like how small the 27.5s feel because they're easier to like shroud and whip and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so you know, like I've gotten on
Mm.
29ers and I like them, but my bike right
What's
now. Go ahead.
what size bike
It's
do you ride?
a large.
Okay.
Yeah,
So are you sponsored by Jameis Bikes?
correct. Yes.
Because I don't want to like throw out another bike out there in case I don't want to
Yeah.
piss off your sponsor.
No, 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 you're good. You're good.
There is this bike by Revel, and selfishly because I ride for Revel. So I found this out when I was in Sedona. Dakota, who rides for them, he does
Okay.
a lot of parks. He got one of their 27.5 bikes, the Revel Rail,
Yep.
and he
That's a
put a
sick
single
bike.
speed on there with a
Sick.
180 mil fork. And that's all that dude runs for parks. And I saw the bike and I was like, Dakota, this is actually kind of perfect. And he's tall
Yeah.
like you.
Yeah.
And he said, this is amazing. And he was at the bike park just in Sedona, like doing laps on that thing. And
Revel has a crazy line of bikes. Like their race bike is nuts. Their big bike is nuts. Like, yeah, no, Revel does a really, really good job of being like, we do mountain bikes and we do them really well. And I
yeah,
very much so respect that. You know, it's interesting because the bike that I have set up, I want to switch it to a little bit more of like Park Slayer mode. So I'm doing a 1.8 angled headset in there to make it a little bit slacker.
ooh, yeah,
And that'll really slacken it out to like your really, really aggressive park bike. So like a Norco Shore, New Proof Data type of thing. And then I'm gonna put offset bushings in my shock to expand the like the full stroke of the shock a little bit.
right.
It'll theoretically make it a little bit bigger and potentially sweep out the back a little bit, make it just a little bit longer. And so we'll see how that feels because the bottom bracket's technically going to get a little bit lower, which is not a concern for me, but it might give me an opportunity to put an extra 10 mil in the front. So
Yeah. And by doing that, you're going to slack out the head tube angle anyway. So
exactly. And I actually wrote on one of my buddies' hard lines who has a 1.8 angle headset in there. And it's so funny because like I got on it and I was like, oh, this bike's sick. And then I hit like my first hard corner and totally washed the front out. And I was like, yep, this is a little bit slacker than my bike. So yeah, I'm gonna play with my bike a little bit this spring, I think, because I really like how it's running stock. But I think there's a lot that you can do to a bike to make it your own. And, you know, frankly, I think this is a lot of thing that sponsored riders don't really talk about is like, I don't think a lot of sponsored riders are riding their bikes out of the box, right? Like they're not just like, oh, here's my bike. I'm going to ride it per manufacturer specifications. Cause like we're usually doing something very, very specific where we do need to alter it to fit our vibe. And like that's the best part about these bikes. They're so highly customizable that you can really make them however you want. So so like, I'm not completely sold on the coil quite yet. It looks sick, like it looks cool, and that's kind of why I'm like, oh, I want to keep the coil, but I do really like the feel of air, kind of overall. So
it's interesting because I have never really ridden coil, but I'm demoing a transition relay right now. And that has a coil on it. And it's too bad. I was going to take it to the bike park, but we got snow here at Sky Park, so I couldn't do it. And then I was going to go to Velocity this weekend to ride with Mark and them. But my wife's like, well, we're going to Italy the following weekend and we're not going to have time to do anything. And
you're
I'm like,
fine. And the problem is?
So I've ridden it in my local trails, but the bike is so killer. It's 170 front and rear. So it's a big, big chunky bike. And I'm going to do the best I can to do chunk over here in Simi Valley this weekend to test it out. But for what I've done so far, the coil is so cush. The coil is like this squishy, soft. I really like it. And I have a Revel Rail 160, 155 with a Fox X2 on there. And it's pretty good.
Yeah.
So I wonder what that would be like with a coil. And I know the suspension platform plays a difference on there too. but to an extent.
It does. And I mean, if you do already have a progressive designed platform, like a coil might be good on that and it gives you the best of both worlds. But so here's a hot take, right? Transition. It's a 170 mil bike. Like, in your opinion, are these bikes way too big for the general public?
100%. Yes. And that's actually what I'm going to put in my review. The bike is amazing. It rides really well, but it's
a Cadillac though.
It's a Cadillac and it's amazing. And I love that you can take the battery out and you lose 5 pounds on it, but it's also an alloy bike. And take a guess at how much the small.
Are you not an alloy fan?
No, it's not that I'm not an alloy fan. Oh. Just take a guess at how heavy the bike is. It's a small frame.
Without the battery?
Just do with and then without.
Okay, so 46, 38.
More.
Are you 52, 42?
More.
Oh my God. So you're going to blow a rotator cuff trying to put it on a bike rack.
It's 56 pounds with the battery. It's a small frame.
We're all going to be out here looking like Schwarzenegger by the time we get on e-bikes. Jesus.
That's like the time I tried the Cannondale full suspension, full like e-bike. I couldn't lift that onto my bike rack. My wife had to come and like help me.
Oh my God. Dude, I know. Like it's so funny. Like, okay, so my like body image critique is I have really overdeveloped traps. Like my traps are like, I think my traps are huge. And I was like, I would give anything to give my traps to other people. But I'm like, genuinely, it's because I'm lifting my bike into the back of the truck. I just have huge shoulders and huge straps.
But that's a plus, though, because it helps you when you ride. It helps you when you're going to do all the things, Like, I don't have a strong upper body. I wish I did.
Yeah. Dude, it's so true, though, because, like, it sucks, right? Because everybody glamorizes the big bikes. The 180 park bike, you need at least 170 in the front to ride.
Yeah.
And frankly, like I was talking to Eric Riding Dirty, and he rides for YT, and he has a YT. Oh gosh, I don't know which one it is, but it's like
he has a few.
It's like he has like a 150, 140. And we were riding out at Haas, and he's like, honestly, Amanda, he's like, this is the sweet spot. He's like, 140 in the back is the sweet spot for 90% of the riding that 98% of the people do. You know what I mean? Because like you can pedal it, you can maneuver it, but it still has that amount of cushion. And I'm just like, man, every bike manufacturer is touting up their big, heavy, huge bikes, being like, you need to be on this. And I'm like, honestly, dude, I think the 140, 130 might make a really hot comeback eventually. I know.
So I started on this. This was my first full squish, was the Revel Rascal V1, and they just sent me the V2. It's 130, 140. And I had on my V1, I made it 150 in the front because I wanted just the little extra, because I was trying to learn to progress and do some jumps and all that kinds of stuff. And then it got spicy with the 130 in the back. So I went to the rail 155, 160, and I thought that's good. I don't need anything more.
Yeah.
And my wife rides a Santa Cruz Tallboy. She has 120, 130. That for her is like the perfect trail bike. Hungul takes it to bike parks, dude. Like she'll go to Sky Park and jump. She's kind of like you. She's not as tall as you, but she's lean and fit. And so she's like, this is the perfect bike. I don't need it. I'm small. Like I'm not heavy. I'm not bottoming out. Right.
Absolutely.
So then get this. We go to Santa Cruz. I wanted to upgrade her to a park bike, like a higher travel bike.
Yep.
And I gave her two options. Either you get the Santa Cruz Heckler SL, which is 160, 150. Really good bike. Dropping a review on that in 2 days. Shameless plug. And then, or you can get their Bronson or the Rubion, which is like 160, 150. And that would be perfect for parks.
Yep.
And so she chose the non-e-bike because she actually enjoys pedaling. She's weird.
Yeah. I'm with her, dude. It's going to take a lot to get me on an e-bike for sure.
Yeah. I mean, they're fun, but each to their own, right? Like bottom line for her, it came down to, I'm not really going to use the e-bike. So I'd rather get a bigger, a higher travel bike that I'm going to use at parks. We built the bike, we're dialing it in, and she's like, oh, this is really squishy. My feet don't hurt when I do jumps. I'm like, wait, your feet were hurting? She's like, I was on a 120 travel bike. And I was like, oh shit.
So did you ride flats?
Yeah, she rides clipped. I ride flats.
Oh God. I was going to say, like, her ankle mobility must be amazing. But okay, I was saying with clips on a small suspension, I could see how her feet were hurting. But
Yeah.
dude, it's just, yeah, I don't know. Like, I think that the smaller bikes need to have a comeback and need to be
Yeah.
glamorized. Because like, even look at like Pinkbike. Every year they're like the enduro bike of the year. And
Mm.
6 years ago, an enduro bike would have been a 150, 140. And now they're like, yeah, here's this 180, 180 enduro bike. And I'm like, hold up, dude. Like, your average guy cannot pedal that up a technical climb. Like, it's heavy. You have to be so strong to move those bikes around. And
But
they're
that's why
rad.
e-bikes are making a comeback. That's why they're putting e-bikes with motors with 170 on them,
I
because
think
then you
so.
can.
I think so. I know it's crazy. Yeah, because everyone's like, oh, bigger, bigger, bigger. And I'm like, I don't know, dude. Like, there's a space for smaller bikes for sure.
There is. And I found that in Sedona, especially for like this trail bike, the 130, 140, the
Yeah,
Rascal was perfect.
dude, that thing
And
probably
I've
ate it
ridden
up.
the rail there too, the higher traveler 160, and I thought that was a bit much. Coil in
Yeah,
Sedona, I think, is a bit much. That's just my personal opinion. I'm not saying people should
yeah,
do it. That's just
yeah,
my personal opinion.
yeah. No, I think I would agree with that for sure. Yeah, because I have a race bike, obviously to prepare for Vapor Trail in September,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a 130, 120.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time looking at race bikes, being like, what kind of cross country bike do I want for this race? And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
my friends were pushing me towards like an Orbea Ois, like a 110,
Yeah.
100. They were like,
Mm-hmm.
dude, you need like a race bike. And the more I was thinking about it, I was like, I think a bike like that is fantastic for like short track, where it's all
Yeah.
about watts and like going ham for an hour. But I was like, dude, I'm going to be on this bike for 18 hours, 20 hours. I was like, I think it has to be like a happy medium between sporty and light, but also like a little bit comfortable. So I ended up with I think a 130, 120. And dude,
Nice.
the bike weighs like 29 pounds.
That's
And
awesome.
it's nuts because when I first bought it, I was like, it's so delicate, like I'm gonna break it. And so I would like tiptoe around the bike. And finally, like I've gotten into it. And every time I get off my enduro bike and get on that race bike, I like annihilate the poor thing. Like, because it's so easy to move around. And I'm like, oh, this is sick. Like, I feel like I can bunny hop like twice as high. Like, it's super
That's
easy to hit corners
awesome.
with it. I'm like, oh, it's kind of sick to go from like a big, heavy bike to these like dainty little bikes that you can just like demolish on the trail.
Yeah, it makes all the difference. I mean, you feel a
Mhm.
little bit lighter, just like you said. You got a little bit more nimble on there, you know.
Yeah.
Lauren took her big travel bike to Sedona, and I was like, "So, what'd you think?" She's like, "It's good. It's not as efficient as the tall boy. Like, this is not going to be my Sedona bike. Like, I
Yeah.
can do
Yeah.
so much with the 130 in the
Yeah.
front,
Yeah.
you know."
Definitely. Um,
So,
so here's my question. Are you on carbon wheels or aluminum wheels?
aluminum, or I'm Australian, so I would say aluminium. But yeah,
Aluminum.
although yeah, these are Crank Brothers synthesis alloy,
Synthesis.
I believe.
I'm on a synthesis right now too.
It was great. Like, it's my first time riding it. I'm not a fan of the Continental tires, to be honest.
Wow,
Um,
really? You're the first person I talked to who hasn't been a Conti fan.
I know. I just maybe I need more
Wow.
time on them, but I washed out on them twice in Sedona, and I've
Are
never
you
washed out in
serious,
Sedona.
dude? Wow,
Yeah,
that's
twice.
crazy. Because so I run Contis on everything, and I'm like forcing my husband to be on Contis because I'm just a believer. And I have Maxtis on my race bike simply because they
Yeah.
came with them. So I'm like, I'm just gonna use
Mm.
them. And dude, like the Maxis just doesn't have the same feel. And this is me being a beauty queen. And you have to admit this, that after like 3 rides on a Maxis tire, you wash it and the sidewalls all like dusty and cloudy. But like the
Mm.
Contis, they clean up so nice and
Well, it's
they
because
look
they have all the things on the side. They have like this beautiful pattern on the
a
side so
nice
things don't stick
texture.
to it.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm like, the tires are so cute. And I'm like, they're great. They're great. They're great tires. But like, come on, man. When you wash your bike up and you got this like jet black tire with like the yellow, I was like it's a good
Yeah.
looking tire.
I know, I agree with you there. I'm running the Revel carbon wheels on my recycled carbon wheels on my rail though with
See, what do you
Hydra.
think? What do you think about the feel from carbon to alloy?
To be honest with you, the only difference I can really feel is in the hub.
Well, yeah,
I
Hydra's super
mean, I
nice.
can't
Really?
really. I mean, I've only ridden carbon wheels on the rail, so I've
Sure.
never really felt what that was like. Although, no, I lie. I think the specialized ones I have a carbon.
Really?
But I don't know, dude. I feel like the only difference for me is the hub with the engagement. That's like the
Really?
one thing I could tell the difference on. What about you? What do you
Yeah, so I've ridden alloy forever because I'm cheap. Um, and I have carbon now on my race bike. And I've ridden the bike for 6 months now, so I'm like, I feel like I have like a fair analysis of them. And the wheels are so stiff. And part of me really appreciates like the heavy compliance that comes with an alloy wheel. And
Mm-hmm.
like, I feel like I notice it really hard when I'm like pushing hard out of a corner. Like the carbon wheels are just kind of like ding, like they just kind of like ding you off the corner. Whereas like the alloy wheels do kind of like cave into it a little bit. And like they
Yeah.
like accept your push and like slingshot you a little bit more. And so it's interesting.
Mm.
Like I do think it's like a rider field. Like, do you like that like really fast responsiveness of the hard carbon, or do you prefer like the softer feel of the alloy?
But
And I
then to
think
what
I prefer
extent
the
are the
soft
tires?
feel.
But then to
It's
what
so true.
extent, like, you know, like, is the Maxxis making a difference? Is the Conti making a difference
It's true. It's
too?
true. Well, and you know what too? Because we just put some We Are One carbon wheels, like they're free ride wheels on the park bike. And they recommend that you don't put inserts in there because it
Ooh,
ruins like the purpose of the carbon. And we were like, this goes against
interesting.
everything that we would ever want. Like, because I would not, you wouldn't catch me dead without inserts, right? But they're like, do not put inserts in there. And so we're like, okay, but it's interesting because obviously it gives the sidewalls a little bit more of a tall feel.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So my race bike also doesn't have inserts in there because I think the general consensus is if you're running carbon to don't run
Mhm.
inserts, which feels wrong, but you're right because my alloy wheels do have inserts in there. So I
I
think there's
mean,
a lot of variables there.
there's 100%. So Dakota, who I was telling you about earlier, he runs an insert in his carbon rims in the back
Really,
on the back of his Rail 27.
I mean, yeah, it
So,
seems
and
crazy.
that's
It
the
seems
only
crazy
one he
not to.
has.
It
He
seems
doesn't
crazy
have it in the
not to.
front, just the back.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy, but like, yeah, because like we were like on the phone with VR1, and they're like, do not put inserts in there, and I'm like, okay, like we'll see how long these last, you know. And it was funny because we brought the carbon wheels with us to Virgin, and we brought a whole surrogate bike with us. So we were like, if anything explodes on any of our bikes, we have a bike that we can cannibalize
Yeah.
because we were just like, frankly, I don't trust the carbon wheels without inserts. But like they did fine. And granted, you know, Virgin's not a rocky place, but we were
Mhm.
like, hey, like we might case like a super sharp jump. Well, I guess we'll see if the wheels last. We didn't do that luckily. But yeah, I mean they held up so far, but we'll see how they do against these like really hard, fast, rocky trails. I don't
Yeah,
know.
you should do a review for us. Let us know what you think of it.
I know, I know. Well, and I realized too, right? Like there's a lot of different wheel types and different strategic ways to lay carbon to give a wheel a different feel and a different purpose. So
Mhm.
I get that
Mhm.
there's a lot of variables there. But yeah, we're just kind of like, okay, like we're running these $1,800 wheels with no freaking inserts. Like, good luck.
Yeah. Yeah. Damn. I'd
Weird.
be curious about that for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, we have had such a good time talking, I think, and that I've had like so many questions for you, and I would skip like all of them.
No.
But one thing I do want to touch on,
Yeah.
because I know it's getting late for you over there too, is your Vapor Trail race series. Like, if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Oh God. So what did I get myself into?
Yeah.
I like seriously like and part of it was in support of one of my best friends. They had a pretty bad ACL injury where they had to re put together their ACL and their meniscus. And they were like, dude, we should like do this ridiculous race and like we can train for it and it'll get us like super fit and super strong. And I was like, okay, cool. And then like I sat down and like really looked at this race. Like, so it's in Salida, Colorado, and it's pretty much like 100% off-road single track. It goes through like some of the IMBA epics in the mountains
Hmm.
over there. And it's 17,000 feet of climbing and 125 miles. And like you have to get it done in like under 22 hours. And
What?
so I know it's nuts. And the race starts at 10 p.m. And so you start in the dark and have to just like make it through that first night with like lights and all this stuff. And so it's been such a foreign experience to me because, like I said, it took me like 2 months to even shop for the type of bike that I wanted because I've never shopped for a cross country bike. It's never remotely been on my radar, you know? So it's like there was a lot of learning with that. I've been doing so much like testing with different types of bike lights
Yeah.
and like we've been trying to talk critically about like what does nutrition look like? Like how do we keep ourselves awake for 20 hours? Like that's something I've
Yeah.
never done.
Yeah.
And you know, the vapor trail, the 0 to 125 series that we started, the goal of it was really to document us going from, you know, 0 to 125 miles in this race.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we preface that we're not at 0, right? Like we're both really great, like athletes, we're fit. We like know how to get on a bike and we put the miles in, but it's been crazy because there's been just like a lot of super boring zone 2 training on a trainer. And it's
Yeah.
just not glamorous. And being like, all right, let's go ride 50 miles today. And a lot of times, like, you can't really have a super fun ride. You're just like, okay, like, I got to preserve my energy and make sure I can stay for 50 miles. And so I think I'm in the phase of training for it that I'm like, I don't actually know if this is possible. I don't feel super confident in this. Like, how am I going to ramp myself up to being able to do this? But I mean, the race is in September, so I have a lot of time still to get trained up for it. But like,
I mean, you do, and you got to get out of your head because I know you're probably in that mindset back in your 20s when you were in college of road biking and how boring it is to
I
train for it.
well, dude, I know, and that's like one of the things I was saying because one of our buddies, he was like, you know, there's a lot of really great ways that you can train for endurance without being on the bike for 4 hours. And I'm like, I hear you, but one of the biggest problems I have is boredom. Like I think a lot of us,
Mm,
especially with how exciting mountain biking is, like you're just constantly looking for that next hit and that next little piece of excitement. And I was like, I know for a fact there's going to be a time at 2 p.m. after I've been on that bike for 17 hours and I'm climbing up some boring freaking Forest Service road and I'm going to be so bored. And it's like, I need to be on the bike for a long amount of time to just get comfortable with that boredom and be like, hey, I'm bored, but I'm going to keep going. Like, you know what I mean?
listen to something. Put a podcast on. Put a like an audiobook. I really started getting into audiobooks lately. Like that
I,
was what would get me through.
I do think that's probably something I'm going to end up doing. And it's a whole other strategy that we haven't even dove into yet. But it's like, do you sit with your thoughts? Like, do you try to distract yourself with it? You know, and I'm like, I
Yeah.
do think the easier solution is probably distraction. But yeah, it's funny because I'm like, I'm not necessarily worried about like mountain biking down the Monarch Trail like at night. I'm more just like, what is 2 p.m. gonna look like the next day? You know, it's like it's a beautiful day, but like I'm gonna be there like looking like a zombie, like so like clapped out, just being like, I gotta get to the finish line.
I think you're psyching yourself out. I'm going to text you this book that I read that's a game changer. It's called The Fearless Mind. Have you heard of
Ooh,
it?
okay. I don't think I have actually.
Have you watched Braden Brinhurst's
Yeah,
8600?
yeah. I actually I have that freaking thing on repeat when I'm on my bike trainer.
I
Such a good video.
It's the book that he read to get through to that whole enchilada by the same
Interesting.
Aussie guy. And I met him at the Sedona Mountain Bike Fest and I totally geeked out. I don't typically geek out, but I geeked out when I
That
met
guy's
Braden.
amazing. I mean, he's amazing. Like, what an animal. But I mean, yeah, I mean, again, I was like, he did that. And going up the whole enchilada is insane. I was like, I can certainly pedal my bike, you know, like, because 0 to 1, like the vapor trail, like, it's not going to be horribly technical. You know what I mean? Like, there's going to
Right.
be points where you have to be focused, but like, it's not like you're going to be like descending some like black downhill trail. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's just going to be a matter of like keeping your wits about yourself. But yeah, I mean, dude, what he did was insane. Like just yeah, that video is so inspirational. I watch it so much.
The guy's crazy. We watched it like the day before the Sedona Mountain Bike Fest. One of our friends hadn't watched it and it was crazy.
Dude, like it's so weird because like for some reason that movie like it kind of makes you want to cry. And like one of my favorite parts about it is the very end where when he finishes, it's just like dark and horrible weather. And like
Yeah.
it's so unceremonious. He's just like, oh, we did it. And I was
Yeah.
like, you know, I'm like, that's cool. Cause like, granted, that video has well over 1 million views on YouTube and it's so celebrated. But in that moment, you must wonder, like, did he have an idea on what the finish was going to feel like? You know, you have this thought of like eternal glory and there's going to be people cheering for me, but he
Yeah.
just like ended at the top of Burrow Pass. The weather was horrific and he was there with like 4 of his friends. And he was like, cool, we did it. You know, and
It's a
it's
great
like
question for
it's
him. No one asked
interesting.
him
Yeah,
that.
it's a very interesting way to finish such a iconic and like historic ride.
Is that something you would want to do? Not the same thing he did, but a challenge to that magnitude.
Yeah. And to be totally honest, like I do see the vapor trail as like a very similar challenge. Like it's so out of my wheelhouse and so something I haven't done before that like I want to prove that I can do it. You know what I mean? And be like, hey, like
Yeah.
I can be a free rider and do all these cool big things that like I enjoy and I'm like comfortable with. But I also want to say like, hey, I can also be an endurance athlete and kind of just be that all around person. So it's a really interesting test of like just in general human performance and what we can do as humans.
100%. And
Yeah,
it's all in your head. Like
it
that's what the
is.
book will teach you. Like it's 100% in your head, you know?
Yeah, and I think, and I'm so excited to explore that because you're right. Like I fight with myself more than anybody, right? Like I am my own worst enemy, and it's a character flaw, but it's good for me to do those insanely challenging things to be like, hey, like fight that negative mindset, like come out on top, the better person, the stronger person. So
I don't think it's a character flaw. I think it's big to recognize that you have that and you want to change it or do something about it, you know?
yeah,
Because I'm the
yeah,
same way as you. We're our
yeah,
own worst enemies.
yeah, yeah.
I'm
It's
gonna ask.
I was
Go
gonna say, I
ahead.
wish I could manage it in less physically taxing ways. I should maybe just like have a chat with myself instead of riding 125 miles on my mountain bike.
I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do. Like
You're
some
like,
people,
you're
that's
like,
what you
you
gotta
you
do.
realize there's other ways you can handle this, right?
I don't know. For me, it used to be because I've played the drums my entire life. So
Oh,
before
sick.
COVID, when I could actually play my drums and not everyone worked from home, that's how I would let out my stress. So I
That's
would just get on there and
amazing.
like bang on that shit all the time.
Heck yeah, dude. That's sick.
Um, so I'm gonna have one last question for you.
Okay.
And what is okay? Every time I ask this question of people, it comes off weird. But I want to know what your best worst advice is that you've received on the trail. So like
God.
the advice is so bad that it's like the best worst you've ever received. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, like the worst of the worst, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's and I feel like I've gotten it a few times and it's a huge pet peeve of mine and it's just lean back.
Yes. Oh my
Um, and I
God.
think I think a lot of people would probably answer that question that way. And it's I think a close second would be like just the general fear of your front brake. But for me, it's definitely the just lean back to be like, oh, it's steep and it's technical, just lean back. And I was like, well, wait a minute, like you can get into the physics explanation of like keeping yourself centered above your bottom bracket.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, from a certain point of view, it may look like someone's leaning back, but I was like, you need to keep equal weight on your front and rear tires.
Yes. Chin over stem. Chin
Oh my
over
god.
stem.
I know. No, I know, and you know, it's so funny, and I think one of the reasons that that particular a piece of advice bothers me so much is because like women in general carry their center of gravity a little bit lower than men, and so a lot of times like there's going to be differences in riding position, and that's just a
Yes.
natural occurrence, and it's like the way that we are going to ride our bike in the most balanced way is going to look different than how your average guy
100%.
rides his bike. And so I think like getting advice from a guy being like, yo, just lean back. And it's like, I hear you, but like also
No.
I do know how I ride and I know like how my body is on the bike. And like I'm not gonna listen to Mr. Jabroni over here telling me to lean back.
Yeah. The trail side Chad. Nope.
Yeah. What about you? Like what is your worst advice?
It was that as well, but the one that really sticks to my mind is your front brake doesn't exist,
I hate that.
which
Dude,
is the worst advice you could ever get because the front brake is what I use more than the back brake.
doesn't it generate like 70% of your stopping power on average?
Yes.
I know. Ugh.
And that's how you know you're a good rider, in my opinion, is you're able to go slow and controlled, and you're only using your front brake the majority
Yeah.
of the time. I
Yeah.
had to learn that when I took my first mountain bike lesson like 2 years ago, and I actually learned the fundamentals of mountain biking.
Yeah.
And Molly, who's an amazing human, was telling me that, and I was like, "Oh, that makes so much sense."
Well, yeah, you know, it's funny because that piece of advice is what transformed my riding really dramatically. And then, of course, the tip of entering high and exiting low on corners. I think
Yes.
those two pieces of advice like totally transform my riding. And it's funny because braking and cornering is such an unglamorous and like unsexy part of riding, but like that's what makes you so fast and so good.
Yes, because that was the other thing she taught me too, was the braking and the cornering. And like
Yeah.
that photo of me that I told you that I looked at and I was like, "Oh my God, that actually looks really good." And someone's like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
you're pointing your knees in that direction." It's stuff that I didn't think about because for me it
Yeah.
comes instinctually. But
Hmm.
it's like learning to do the basics and then just
Yeah.
practicing it and you're
Yes. And then
faster, you're
It
Yeah.
becomes
Body
second nature.
separation. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Yeah, no, but just lean back. Like whenever I hear that on the trail, I like use all of my power to be like, don't go over there. Like, don't correct it. This is not your place to do this, you know. But it's just like, oh, like this guy's gonna kill this guy, telling him to just lean back.
Yeah, you don't want that liability on your hands. Let him handle the liability on his.
Oh my god, I know. Seriously, I'm like, I'm just gonna leave. I don't want to see what's gonna happen here.
Just real quick, Tori Hiker, he said the Santa Cruz Reserve carbon wheels they really are. I should have said that I rode them on the Santa Cruz Heckler SL that I demoed for a few months, and
Yeah,
that was like a pretty solid ride.
dude,
And now it makes sense.
the
The
reserves
stiffness.
look amazing. So yeah, it's got to be stiffness, right? And I would love
Yeah.
to hear from Tori, like, is it the stiffness that's holding the edge really well? Because it's funny, right? The way I'm like, oh, alloy, like I say it kind of like folds into the corner. Like it sounds bad, but it's really more of a rider feel. But dude, the reserves are sick. Like, because the
Yeah.
wheel is really sweet, but their warranty is also amazing. And like I feel
Yeah.
like whenever we were shopping for carbon wheels, like we were like, oh yeah, the wheel, but also like let's really read the warranty to see like when we do break them, how supported are we going to be?
Yeah. And we got a tour of the Santa Cruz factory in
That's sick.
January, and we got to see them making it and having, because everything for Santa Cruz is done in-house.
Which is sick.
So it's really cool. I have to put that video together of doing all of that, but
My
it
gosh.
just clicked for me right now too. I'm like, yeah, the stiffness on the e-bike, riding the e-bike. But also I think it had Agasai tires on there. Like that makes a huge
Yeah.
difference for me.
For
So
sure. For sure.
yeah.
You know, it'd be interesting, which I'm never going to put Crip totals on the race bike. That doesn't make any sense. So I would never kind of
Right.
have a one-to-one comparison. But to be totally honest, we have Crip totals on the park bike, and they have those VR1 carbon wheels. So I think I need to spend some time on that to see how it feels and do a one-to-one comparison.
Yeah, for sure. One of my crew, one of my friends, Candace, who's like the person who keeps me going on this.
Yeah.
She just texted me. She couldn't make it to the live pod, but she said that she got to see you at Howler Bike Park briefly.
Oh yeah, sick.
And she said, she goes, she's sick and an inspiration to me. So I have to connect you guys.
Oh my god, dude. Howler is such a sick place, dude. Like, so I was lucky enough to be able to do a like release video for their biggest, like their newest free ride trail. I partnered up with with a YT rider over there, and we put together a wild edit. And it was so fun because that was like the first like professional edit that I was able to work on. And it was nuts because I broke the damper in my fork, and my buddy totally like destroyed. Dude,
how do you do that?
I know. Like I'm like, it's like a highlight of my life because I'm like, dude, I broke a damper on a fork and I rode out of it, which was the sickest part. But the part of the trail has this really big step down on it. You can either do this like on-off wall ride or just do like a straight step down. And so me and my buddy rode off the step down, and I was following him, and I think I just went like a little bit slower just because I was like chasing him, and I cased it a bit, and there was just this like insane like snapping noise. And it was nuts because I was like, when I landed, like in my mind, I was like, that was a pretty hard landing. And my buddy like locked up both of his brakes, like slid out through his bike and started sprinting back towards me. And I stopped, and I was like, whoa. And he's like, oh my God. He's like, I thought you broke your fucking back. Cause he's like, he heard that like crazy noise. He's like, I literally thought your spine broke. And I was like, yeah, like, I was like, dude, I don't know what happened. Like the noise sounded crazy. And we looked down at my fork, and it like, I got like sprayed with suspension oil, and my fork was completely rigid. And so halfway through the shoot, we had to swap my fork out. So the video is super funny because if you look really, really closely at the video, there's a little part where I'm not in there. And then there's a part where I go from a Fox fork to an Öhlins. And so it's super funny. It's like it's a very deep cut that if you look closely at the video, you'll be like, oh, that's where Amanda broke her fork.
Okay, I need to find that video.
Yeah, dude. But it was funny. It was funny because when we took the fork off, I was like shaking it. And in the lower, you can hear the damper like clanging around in there.
Oh my God. That's gotta be some type of a record. That's amazing.
But yeah, it was crazy because my buddy was like, how did you ride out of that? I'm like, I guess I'm just that strong.
It's the traps.
Yeah, it's my overdeveloped traps.
Oh God, Amanda, you are freaking amazing. And I can't wait to ride with you sometime this year. I think we're gonna have so much fun.
Dude,
Just
yeah,
talking
it's gonna
bikes. I
be
think we could
it
sit here
might
for
just be
3
more
hours.
laughing than more riding, but I'm totally okay with that.
Oh, who cares? It's going to be amazing.
Oh my
Thank
God,
you guys who
Jody.
tuned in. And for all of you who are listening, I'm going to put all this information in on the description, how you can follow Amanda, the YouTube channel of the Vapor Trail series, the Pinkbike articles, the bike that she's on right now, like all the good stuff. I'm going to list all of that on there for y'all. So thank you for listening. Amanda, thank you. You're freaking awesome. I can't say that enough.
Thank you for having me. Such a good conversation.
We're going to have to do a part 2 of this when we ride together, because I think a trailside podcast is going to be pretty insane.
That would be hilarious. We're going to have to probably bleep out a few words, though, to be totally honest.
I mean, we've been cussing throughout this thing, so it doesn't really matter. It's explicit.
I do get a little savage on the trail, but it's natural.
I'm Australian. I drop the C word a lot, so I'm just going to give you that
Wonderful.
kind of heads up.
You know,
Okay.
it's coming back. It's coming back. Like, it's becoming a compliment. And I'm like, I think I like that.
Yeah. I was just talking to someone about that today. Anyway, you're awesome. Have a great night. Thanks to everyone who listened live. And I hope those of you who are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts are also enjoying your time. So have a great night, everyone. We'll talk soon.
Good night.
Bye.